On the second Sunday of May, while other mothers were unwrapping scented candles and greeting cards, I was standing barefoot in my kitchen, scraping burnt egg off a pan, waiting for my son to say something that never came. Not even a "Happy Mother's Day." Just silence. And when he finally did speak, it broke something inside me so quietly, no one noticed it cracked. But that morning, as sunlight fell across the kitchen table, I had no idea it would become the first chapter of my revenge story, the quiet kind, the kind no one sees coming. Before all this, I was just Catherine Ellis, wife to John, mother to Jason, and for the longest time, that was enough. We built everything from scratch, literally. The house, the barn, the fence posts, we dug them ourselves, one blister at a time. Back then, money was tight, but laughter was easy. John used to say, "If the land holds, the love will too." When Jason was born, the land became more than dirt. It became memory. I rocked him on that creaky porch swing when he had colic, taught him how to ride a bike between the apple trees, picked ticks off his hair after every summer hike. And when John got sick, fast then slow then gone, I stayed. Held everything together with duct tape and casseroles, paid the taxes, fed the chickens, fixed the pipes, alone, quietly. I didn't ask for help, not even when the roof started leaking, because I believed one day Jason would come back, not just with his body, but with his heart. I believed he'd remember that this land wasn't just soil, it was sacrifice. He used to write me notes as a boy. "You're the best mom in the world." In crooked letters, folded in half, slipped under my pillow. I kept every single one in a shoebox in the closet, even when he left for college, even when he forgot to call on my birthday, even when he married a woman who called me Kathy, like we were co-workers instead of family. I held on because I'm a mother, and mothers hold on until they can't. That was me before the Sunday morning when my son finally looked me in the eye and said I no longer mattered. I remember the smell of bacon that morning. I woke up early like I always did on Mother's Day, warmed the cinnamon rolls Jason used to love, even set out his favorite blue mug. I was trying, even after all these years. He showed up late, Bree trailing behind, talking on the phone. The grandkids ran in, heads down, already arguing over who got the tablet first. No hugs, no flowers. Jason dropped his keys on the counter and said, "You didn't have to cook, Mom. We're grabbing lunch with Bree's parents anyway." That stung more than I let on. I smiled, nodded, said, "It's just nice to see you." We sat down. They ate quickly. Bree picked at her plate like she was doing me a favor just being there. Then it happened. So casual, I almost missed it. Jason laughed, some joke I didn't hear, and turned to his friend who'd come along. "This place? Oh, it's just Mom's, but not for long. We've got plans for the land once it's transferred." I froze. I didn't say a word, just stared at him. My son, my boy, who once clung to my leg crying on the first day of school, was talking about this house, my home, like it was already his. And then he said it, looking right at me, almost like he thought I'd laugh along. I mean, let's be honest. Mom's past the stage where she can really manage all this. She's done her part. She's done her part. Like I was a chapter already closed. If you've ever had your life's work summarized into a throwaway sentence, you know the kind of silence that follows. It's not shock. It's something colder. It's knowing you were never the ending. They just never expected you to still be part of the story. If you've ever had someone treat your years of sacrifice like a footnote, tell me below. I want to hear from women who've been told they're done, because you're not. You're never done. And before I continue with what happened next, I want to pause for just a moment. If this story is hitting close to home, if you've ever been erased by the people you gave everything to, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from, what city, what country. And if you've ever been told you're past the stage of mattering, share that too. Your story matters to me. Now let me tell you what I did next. I didn't argue that day, didn't cry. I cleared the dishes, packed up leftovers they never touched, and watched their car roll down the driveway without even a backward glance. And I stood there in the doorway thinking not about what I had lost, but about what I had given. Because the worst part of being erased? It's realizing they thought they had the right to do it. It didn't fall apart overnight. That's the cruel part. It unraveled quietly, like thread slipping from a spool you didn't notice was loose. A week after that Mother's Day, Jason stopped answering my calls right away. Messages got shorter. He wasn't angry. He was just unavailable. 2 weeks later, Bree sent a group text about repurposing the back acre for a future business venture. She wrote, "It'd be such a cute spot for a little glamping cafe. Rustic vibes, good for Instagram." No one asked what I thought. Then came the day they brought over a man in khakis and a clipboard. I watched from the window while he walked the fields John and I once planted, shoulder to shoulder. The man pointed at trees like they were obstacles, not memories. Jason never even knocked to say hi. That night I asked gently, "Are you planning something with the land, sweetheart?" Jason didn't even look up from his phone. "It's time we modernize things, Mom. You know, make use of it. Dad always wanted this place to stay in the family." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, because what he really meant was, "You're no longer part of the family as we define it." I had become the furniture, still in the room, but not part of the conversation. Then came the birthday party for my youngest granddaughter. I brought a handmade quilt I'd spent 2 months sewing, each square stitched with a memory, fabric from Jason's baby blanket, a patch from John's flannel shirt, a corner of the apron I wore every Christmas morning. The little one opened it, blinked, and turned back to her new toy set. Bree smiled thinly. "Oh, it's lovely. We'll find a spot for it eventually." Then she added with a laugh, "She's really into glow-in-the-dark unicorns now." I held that quilt in my lap the whole party. No one noticed. Later, in the car, I cried. But not because they didn't like it. I cried because they didn't see it for what it was, a piece of me. I realized then I wasn't being rejected with cruelty. I was being erased with indifference. And somehow that hurt more, because it wasn't that they stopped loving me. It was that they didn't notice they'd stopped. And I had let it happen, bit by bit, in the name of being easy, of being understanding, of being the kind of mother who never asks for anything in return. Until one day, there was nothing left of me in their version of home except a name on the mailbox they planned to paint over. The day I remembered the deed was the day everything shifted. I had gone into the attic looking for an old recipe box, something to distract me from the quiet. Instead, I found the fireproof folder John always kept behind the trunk, the one with all our important papers. I sat down on the floor, dust swirling in the light from the tiny window, and opened it. There it was, the land deed, still in my name, just mine. Not transferred, not promised, not Jason's. For all his big talk about "Dad said this" and "we're modernizing that," he never even asked who legally owned it. He just assumed, like most people do when they think someone's too quiet to matter. And that was when I heard John's voice, not in some ghostly way, but in memory. Clear, firm, always just a little amused. "If you ever feel like you're being faded out, Katie, remember you built this place too. You have a say in how your story ends." That line hit me like a breeze through a shut window. I sat there with that deed in my lap and realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud. I wasn't part of their future. I was a placeholder, a stepping stone on the way to their next chapter. They had already moved on. I was the only one still pretending we were all standing in the same life together. That night, I didn't cry. I made tea. I folded laundry. I watched the sun set behind the same row of trees John had planted the year Jason was born. I didn't feel angry, just quiet. A different kind of quiet than before. Not the silence of being dismissed, but the silence that comes before a decision. You know that moment before a big storm breaks? The air goes still, the birds stop, and everything holds its breath. That's what it felt like. I looked around the house. At the walls, Jason never painted. At the porch swing, no one sat on anymore. This wasn't a home for a family. It had become a museum of a woman nobody visited. And maybe it was time to stop waiting for them to notice I was still here and start deciding what I would do with the part of me that still was. Because I hadn't vanished. I had simply been put on pause. And now I was ready to press play again, on my own terms. I didn't leave with a fight. I left like the tide, slow, quiet, and certain. The day after I found the deed, I called a real estate agent in a neighboring town. Her name was Laura. She didn't ask many questions, just listened when I said, "I want this done quietly. No signs, no open houses, just clean." 3 weeks later, I signed the papers. The farm, 2 acres of sweat, laughter, broken fences, and sunburnt memories sold for $212,000. The buyer was a retired couple from Colorado. They promised to keep the apple trees. That was enough, I didn't tell Jason. Not out of revenge, out of clarity. Because if he had really been paying attention, he would have known it was never his. The morning I left, I walked through each room of the house like I was saying goodbye to a version of myself. I touched the walls I'd once painted at midnight, smoothed the quilt at the foot of the bed, opened the cabinet where I used to hide ginger snaps for Jason when he was little. Then I wrote him a letter, just 1 page, no anger, no drama. "You assumed, Jason, and I let you. But this home was never promised to you. It was built, cared for, protected by me. And I've decided to let it go before it becomes something I don't recognize. You won't find me here. I've chosen to stop waiting to be seen. I'm not disappearing. I'm just becoming." I left it on the kitchen table under the old vase he never noticed was cracked. Then I got in my car and drove. The mountains in the Ozarks welcomed me like a soft breath. I found a small cottage, 1 bedroom, faded shutters, porch swing that creaked just enough. I planted lavender in mismatched pots, hung my husband's old wind chimes, and for the first time in years, I sat in silence that didn't feel like loneliness. I closed the joint bank account, opened a new one, sent a donation quietly to a women's shelter 2 counties over. In the memo, I wrote, "From a friend who finally walked away." Each morning, I brewed my own coffee, sat by the window, and breathed in the life I had built. Not for anyone else, but for me. I didn't post photos, didn't update my address, didn't leave breadcrumbs, because no one chased ghosts, and I was done haunting a house that never looked for me. It took him 3 weeks to notice I was gone. Jason called twice. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Mom, just checking in. Everything okay?" Then a text. "Heard something about the farm. Call me." I let the messages sit. No malice. Just stillness. On the 4th week, a car pulled into the gravel drive of my new cottage. I was trimming lavender by the porch when I saw him. Same navy truck, same anxious shoulders. He stood at the gate like a boy too big to knock. I didn't move. Finally, he stepped forward. "You really sold it?" he asked. "I did," I said. Not cold, just clear. He looked at the ground. "I thought it was mine." "I know," I replied. "You never asked. You just assumed." He looked up at me then. Really looked. Not at my hands, not at the garden, not at the years on my face, but at me, the woman who raised him. "I didn't mean to make you feel forgotten," he said. "But you did," I said softly. "And the thing is, I let you." He sat on the porch step. I didn't ask him in. I didn't need to. "I didn't expect this," he whispered. "No one does," I said. "No one expects the quiet ones to leave until they already have." We sat for a long time, listening to the lake breathe. Finally, I said, "I'm not angry, Jason. I'm not here to punish you, but I'm also not here to be convenient." He nodded slowly. "So what now?" I handed him a letter, folded, sealed. "This explains where the rest of my assets went. You're not cut out, but you're not the center either." He didn't argue. Before he left, I asked, "Would you like some tea?" He looked surprised. "Even after all this?" "I'm not bitter," I said. "I'm just careful now." We drank in silence. Then he left. No hug, no promises. But he looked back once before turning down the road. That was enough. Later that evening, I stood by the porch railing, watching the sun settle behind the trees. My wind chimes swayed in the breeze. My garden was blooming. Not a single soul knew where I was. And for the first time in decades, I felt seen. You know what I've learned? That silence isn't always submission. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's the calm before you reclaim your life. For years, I thought being a good mother meant being invisible, meant fading into the background so my son could shine, meant sacrificing without acknowledgement, giving without asking, loving without conditions. But somewhere along the way, I confused selflessness with self-erasure. And those are not the same thing. Selflessness is choosing to give. Self-erasure is forgetting you have a choice. I spent decades building a home, raising a child, tending a farm. And when I was done, when the work was finished and the boy had grown, I expected, maybe foolishly, that I would still have a place at the table. Not the head of the table. Not even a seat of honor, just a place. A chair with my name on it. A cup of coffee poured without asking. A phone call that didn't feel like an obligation. But that's not what happened. What happened was I became the help, the backdrop, the woman who used to matter but didn't anymore. And the worst part? I let it happen. I smiled through the dismissals. I laughed at jokes at my own expense. I folded myself smaller and smaller until I fit into the corner they'd decided was mine. And then one day, I realized there was no corner big enough for a woman who'd built the whole house. The months in the Ozarks have been some of the quietest of my life. And I don't mean quiet in a lonely way. I mean quiet in a peaceful way. The kind of quiet where you can finally hear yourself think, where you're not waiting for someone to need you, where your worth isn't measured by how useful you are. I wake up when I want. I drink my coffee on the porch. I read books I've been meaning to get to for 20 years. I garden without worrying if anyone will appreciate it. I cook meals for one and don't apologize. And you know what? It's enough. I'm enough. Just me. Not as someone's mother. Not as someone's wife. Not as someone's caretaker or convenience. Just Catherine. And Catherine, I'm learning, is pretty good company. I've made friends here. Real friends. Women who ask how I'm doing and actually wait for the answer. Who don't need me to be anything other than present. There's Linda, who lives down the road. She's a widow, too. Lost her husband to cancer 5 years ago. We walk together in the mornings, talk about everything and nothing. There's no performance, no pretending. Just two women who've lived long enough to know that honesty is the only currency worth spending. There's also a book club at the library. I joined last month. We're reading a novel about a woman who leaves her family and starts over in a foreign country. Some of the younger women think she's selfish. Some of the older women think she's brave. I think she's both, and I think that's okay. I've also started volunteering at the community center, teaching quilting to anyone who wants to learn. It's funny, the quilt I made for my granddaughter, the one she didn't care about, it became the reason a dozen other women now know how to stitch their own stories together. One of them, a woman named Grace, told me last week, "I never thought my hands could make something beautiful." I smiled and told her, "Your hands have always been capable. You just needed permission to use them for yourself." She cried. I held her hand, and I thought about all the years I spent making things for other people, never once asking if I was allowed to make something for me. Jason has called a few more times since that day at the cottage. The conversations are short, polite. He asks how I'm doing. I tell him I'm well. He tells me about the kids. I listen. But there's a distance now, not born of anger but of boundary. I'm not his emotional support system anymore. I'm not his backup plan. I'm not the woman waiting by the phone hoping he'll remember I exist. I'm just his mother. And sometimes that's enough. and sometimes it's not. And I've learned to be okay with both. Bree sent me a Facebook friend request last month. I didn't accept it. Not out of spite, but because I don't owe her access to my life anymore. She's not my family. She never treated me like family. And I'm done pretending proximity equals connection. I've also been thinking a lot about John, about what he would say if he could see me now. I think he'd be proud, not because I left, but because I finally chose myself. John always said I was stronger than I believed, that I had a spine made of steel wrapped in kindness. I didn't understand what he meant back then. I thought strength was endurance, the ability to withstand, to outlast, to hold on no matter what. But now I know. Real strength is knowing when to let go. Real strength is walking away from people who don't see you and refusing to beg them to look. Real strength is building a life so full, so rich, so entirely yours that their absence doesn't leave a hole. It just leaves space. Space you get to fill however you want. I've been filling mine with small joys, morning coffee, afternoon walks, evening sunsets, books, music, laughter with women who know my name and use it with kindness. I've been filling it with myself, and it turns out I'm more than enough to fill it. Last week, I got a letter from Jason. Not a text, not a voicemail, an actual letter, handwritten. It said, "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't see you. I didn't value you. I thought you'd always be there, so I stopped making sure you knew you mattered. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can, but I want you to know I see it now. I see what I did, and I'm sorry." I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. I didn't respond right away, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I wanted to make sure my response came from a place of clarity, not emotion. A few days later, I wrote back. I told him I appreciated his honesty. I told him I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I told him that forgiveness didn't mean things would go back to the way they were, that I wasn't the woman I used to be, that I'd changed, grown, moved on, and that he'd have to accept the version of me that existed now, not the one he remembered. I haven't heard back yet. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Either way, I'm okay. Because my peace doesn't depend on his response anymore. It depends on me, and I've finally learned how to give myself what I spent years waiting for someone else to provide: validation, worth, love. I've also been thinking about the women who'll come after me, the mothers who'll stand in kitchens waiting for phone calls that never come, the wives who'll lose their husbands and suddenly realize they've lost their identities too, the grandmothers who'll be erased with indifference and told they're done. I want them to know something. You're not done. You're not finished. You're not obsolete. You're not past your prime. You're not too old, too tired, too late. You're just getting started. Because the second half of your life, the part that comes after everyone's taken what they needed, that's yours. That's when you get to decide who you are without the weight of everyone else's expectations. That's when you get to live for yourself, loudly, quietly, however you want. And if they call you selfish, let them. If they say you've changed, agree. Because you have. You've changed from a woman who gave everything to a woman who knows her worth. And that's not something to apologize for. That's something to celebrate. The cottage has become more than a house. It's become a testament to the life I chose instead of the life that was chosen for me. Every morning I wake up to the sound of wind chimes instead of obligation. Every evening I watch the sunset without wondering if anyone needs me. And it's not lonely. It's liberating. I've learned to cook for one without feeling like I'm missing something. I've learned to sit in silence without filling it with worry. I've learned that peace isn't something you find. It's something you build, one boundary at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of choosing yourself over convenience. The lavender I planted has grown wild and beautiful, just like me. It doesn't apologize for taking up space. It doesn't shrink to make room for weeds. It just grows, blooms, exists. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm existing on my own terms, not as a supporting character in someone else's story, but as the protagonist of my own. Linda and I have started a tradition. Every Sunday morning, we meet at the lake and walk for an hour. We talk about everything, our pasts, our regrets, our hopes, but mostly we talk about the present, about how good it feels to wake up and not owe anyone an explanation for how we spend our day. Last Sunday, she told me something I'll never forget. She said, "You know what I love about you, Catherine? You don't apologize for being here." I asked her what she meant. She smiled. Most women our age, we apologize for existing, for taking up space, for having opinions, for wanting things. But you don't. You just are. And it's beautiful. I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her, because she was right. I'd spent so many years apologizing, sorry for asking, sorry for needing, sorry for existing in a way that wasn't convenient, but I'm done apologizing. I'm here. I'm alive. And I refuse to shrink anymore. The book club has become another anchor in my new life. Last month, we read a novel about a woman who rebuilds her life after losing everything. During the discussion, one of the younger women said, "I don't understand why she didn't fight harder to keep her family together." I looked at her, this bright-eyed girl in her 30s, and I said gently, "Because sometimes keeping something together means tearing yourself apart." And she finally realized she was worth more than that. The room went quiet. Then another woman, older, with silver hair like mine, said, "That's the hardest lesson to learn, that you can love someone and still choose yourself." We all nodded, because we all knew. We'd all been there. In that moment of realizing that love without respect is just slow erosion, and we'd all, in our own ways, chosen to step back from the edge before we disappeared completely. After the meeting, 3 women stayed behind and asked if I'd be willing to share my story. I hesitated, not because I was ashamed, but because I wasn't sure anyone would understand. But then I remembered. I didn't leave for anyone's understanding. I left for my own peace. So I told them about Jason, about the farm, about the Mother's Day that changed everything, about finding the deed, about leaving quietly, about building this life in the mountains. When I finished, one of them was crying. She said, "I needed to hear this. I've been waiting for my son to see me for 5 years, and you just gave me permission to stop waiting." I took her hand. "You don't need my permission. You never did. You just needed to remember you have a choice." She hugged me, and I thought about how many women are out there right now, waiting for permission to choose themselves, waiting for someone to tell them it's okay. Well, I'm telling you, it's okay. More than okay. It's necessary. I've also been writing, not anything I plan to publish, just thoughts, memories, reflections. I started the day I moved into the cottage. At first, it was just a way to process everything, to make sense of the grief and anger and relief all tangled together. But somewhere along the way, it became something more. It became a record, proof that I was here, that I mattered, that my story didn't end when they stopped reading. One entry I wrote stays with me. I wrote, "I spent so long being the woman everyone needed me to be that I forgot to ask who I needed me to be." And the answer? Someone who wouldn't abandon herself just to make someone else comfortable. I read that entry often, especially on the hard days, the days when I miss Jason despite everything, when I wonder if I should have tried harder, stayed longer, given more. But then I remember, I gave everything. I stayed for decades. I tried until I had nothing left, and it still wasn't enough. Not because I wasn't enough, but because they'd stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. And I refused to be used up and discarded like I never mattered. The grandkids' birthdays have come and gone. I sent cards, small gifts, nothing extravagant, just enough to say, "I'm still here. I still love you." I don't know if they noticed. I don't know if they care. But I sent them anyway, not because I expect anything in return, but because I'm not going to let their indifference turn me into someone bitter. I can love them from a distance. I can wish them well. I can hope they grow up to be kind, but I don't have to sacrifice my peace to prove it. Jason's letter sits in the drawer beside my bed. Some nights I take it out and reread it. Not because I need the apology, but because it reminds me that people can change, that awareness can dawn even after years of darkness, that sometimes the people who hurt us do wake up and realize what they've done. But here's what I've learned. Their realization doesn't obligate me to return. Their apology doesn't erase the years I spent invisible. Their regret doesn't mean I owe them a second chance. I can acknowledge their growth and still protect my peace. I can forgive and still maintain boundaries. I can love them and still love myself more. And that's not cruelty. That's wisdom. The kind of wisdom that only comes from being hurt enough times to finally learn. I've been thinking about John a lot lately, about the life we built together, the dreams we had, the plans that got interrupted by cancer and grief and reality. I think about what he'd say if he could see me now, living alone in the mountains, quilting with strangers, walking with widows, choosing myself over obligation. I think he'd say, "Took you long enough, Katie." Because John always knew. He knew I gave too much. He knew I held on too tight. He knew I measured my worth by how much I could endure. And he tried to tell me, gently, carefully, in the quiet moments between chores and conversations. "You're allowed to put yourself first sometimes," he'd say. "You don't have to earn your place in this family," he'd remind me. But I didn't listen. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't trust myself. I didn't believe I was worth choosing. I didn't believe my needs mattered as much as everyone else's. But I believe it now. I believe it in the way the sun hits the porch each morning, in the way the lavender sways in the breeze, in the way I can sit for hours reading without guilt, in the way I sleep through the night without worrying if I've done enough. I've started painting, nothing professional, just watercolors, landscapes mostly, the mountains, the lake, the trees. I'm not very good. My trees look like broccoli. My water looks flat. But it doesn't matter, because I'm not painting for anyone else. I'm painting because it makes me happy, and that's enough. Last week, Linda asked if she could buy one of my paintings. I laughed and said, "You don't have to do that." She shook her head. "I'm not buying it out of pity. I'm buying it because it's beautiful and because it reminds me that it's never too late to try something new." So I let her. She hung it in her living room. Every time I visit, I see it there. My crooked trees, my flat water, my imperfect attempt at capturing beauty. And it makes me smile because it's proof that I'm not just surviving. I'm living, really living. For the first time in years, the holidays are coming. I won't be going back to the farm. There is no farm to go back to. The couple from Colorado sent me a photo last month. They'd renovated the kitchen, painted the barn red, planted flowers along the driveway. It looks different, but it looks loved. And that's all I ever wanted for it. To be loved, to be cared for, to be seen for what it was. Jason invited me to Thanksgiving. I thanked him, but declined. I'm spending it with Linda and Grace from the quilting group, and a few other women who don't have anywhere to go or who just don't want to go where they're expected. We're calling it Friendsgiving. We're cooking together, laughing together, being together without the weight of obligation or performance. And I can't wait. I know some people will judge me for that, for choosing friends over family, for spending Thanksgiving with strangers instead of my son. But those people don't know my story. They don't know the years I spent waiting by the phone, the holidays I hosted alone, the effort I poured into relationships that only flowed one way. They don't know what it's like to be erased so slowly you don't notice until you're almost gone. So I don't care what they think. I care what I think, and I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I've also been volunteering at the women's shelter. the one I donated to when I first arrived. Once a week, I go in and teach quilting. Most of the women are young, escaping bad relationships, starting over with nothing. They remind me of myself, not because our stories are the same, but because we all know what it's like to leave, to walk away from something familiar, even when it's hurting you, and step into the unknown. One woman, Maria, told me last week, "I don't know how to be alone." I smiled. "You're not alone. You're just not surrounded by people who make you feel small anymore. There's a difference." She cried. I held her, and I thought about all the times I felt alone even when I was surrounded by family, all the times I felt invisible even when I was standing right there. True loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about being unseen. And I'd rather be alone and seen by myself than surrounded and invisible to everyone else. The shelter director asked me if I'd be willing to share my story at their next fundraiser. I said yes, not because I want attention, but because I want other women to know it's possible. Leaving is possible. Starting over is possible. Choosing yourself is possible. Even when you're older, even when you're tired, even when you think it's too late, it's not. It's never too late. As long as you're still breathing, you still have a choice. And that choice, it's the most powerful thing you'll ever have. So if you're watching this and you're standing in that kitchen, waiting for someone to see you, hear me when I say this. Stop waiting. Don't wait for them to notice. Don't wait for them to change. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Just go. Leave. Walk away. Build the life you've been putting off because you were too busy building theirs. You deserve it. You've always deserved it. And the people who truly love you, they'll adjust. They'll follow. They'll see you. And the ones who don't, they were never really looking anyway. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt. I'm not saying you won't have moments of doubt and grief and wondering if you made the right choice. You will. I have. But here's the truth. Every single time I've doubted, I've looked around at the life I've built, the cottage, the garden, the friends, the peace, and I've known. This was the right choice, not because it's perfect, but because it's mine. Have you ever had to step away from people you loved just to remember who you are? If this story touched something in you, tell me below. Your silence doesn't mean you're gone. Sometimes it means you're finally becoming, and that, more than anything, is worth celebrating. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for reminding me that my story and yours still matters. Because it does. It always has. And it always will.